Hey, what's up, man? Let's give it a few seconds and we'll get Mac in here and get a conversation going. Hey, what's up, guys? No, don't tell me we're gonna
Yo,
have. Don't tell me we're gonna have problems getting connection again. That shit was ridiculous.
is uh, is it lagging?
No, we're good.
Okay. Yeah, my bad for being a little late, man. I ate a cookie in anticipation of the show, and probably got a little more baked than I was expecting.
You gotta eat them like right before the show, because if you do that shit early, it's gonna kick your ass.
Bro, I couldn't get the lead out my ass, bro.
Are you
Yo,
better with
what's up?
edibles? You better with edibles than you are dabs?
Oh, no,
No, it's not.
no, not much, but I enjoy edibles more than dabs because dabs just fucking blanket me, and edibles just make me goofy.
Yeah, if you get really good, like low dose edibles, where you can kind of walk yourself to the point you want to be, then
Hmm.
it's a lot better. But yeah, I have a tendency of just getting way too loaded on edibles. Um, but yeah, it's not really a problem. It's just I have a really high tolerance, so I have
Yeah.
that issue where like I'll take some and I'm still not really baked, and I'll take some and I'm still not really baked, and then I'll do a dab, and then I'm just cremated for the rest of the
See,
day.
see, I know better, man. I know better. I know if I eat the whole cookie, I'm gonna be down. So I gotta eat, crumble at a time, and then I feel amazing right now. I'll tell you that though.
Yeah.
you know,
So
uh,
it's like the difference too is like if you're getting dispensary edibles and they're like, 5 milligram samples or something, that's a lot different than like something your friend makes that's just like,
no,
I don't really know. I just threw a bunch of stuff in the pot,
no,
Like
no. It's
I usually make
it's
edibles like that where I'm just like as strong as they can possibly be, and then they'll be, just eat a little less.
no, it's definitely from a friend. So shout out supply chain and their cookies, man. Like you guys got feeling amazing right now.
Check us out, bro.
That's the plug. Yo, dude,
Shout out
that
to the
right there.
homie Sticky C Murder. The lighting in here is absolutely horrible, but shout out to the homie Sticky C Murder. Lace me up
Bro,
with some dank BHO. Dude does
that
good
is
work.
that is enough supply for Armageddon for me, bro. Like I tell you that that shit will go all through World War III, all that shit, bro. We'll come out on the other side, and I'll be the only one with dab still, bro. Like
I'll
that much, for real.
I'll be lucky if that lasts me a month. I'm doing really good if I stretch that to 30 days. I'm
Yeah.
doing really good. Which is kind of down because there was a time where I was going through like a gram a day, like pretty consistently. And yeah, I had to dial that back. Not necessarily because it's a problem in any way. It just gets to be expensive unless you can produce it
No, for
all
sure.
yourself. And I've run a lot of flour and stuff, but I don't run a whole lot. I used to run, what we would do is run whole rooms and run the whole room as hash.
Right.
And then, then it's pretty cheap to dab as much as you want.
Um,
But if you're not doing something like that, yeah, if you're having to pay for hash or if you're having to even just grow a portion of it and pay for some of it, yeah, it gets really
dude, I
expensive.
still got like half a G left from my birthday gram that I got for myself, bro. 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
What have you been up to, man? What's new?
So I've been been in the garden hard, man, trying to just make sure that I stay consistent, man, and keep working. Yesterday I came through and set up my second trellis net for my left side of the garden, and got 2 tiers of it, so it's looking really nice. They're starting to fill in.
What's the deal with the King Neptune seeds? What is that?
The King Neptune, bro, is I don't know, we just haven't released it yet, bro. We're still hunting through it, bro. We got a pheno that we really love, and we're just planning on working it just a little more until and hopefully the demand will pick up. You know, I mean, people been asking about it. I've been getting DMs, but how you doing, brother? But it's just not ready yet, in our opinion. You know, as a collab effort, we just haven't released it yet.
Oh yeah. But it's something you're working on with somebody else.
Yeah, it's with supply chain. My homeboy Swag, shout out Outlaw, shout out Dula. You know, definitely a good vibe, man. A good team we got going right now, bro. And the work speaks for itself. It's like, you know, we kind of met maybe about once a year and a half ago, and we just clicked. And then we was like, hey man, I got a project going. I said, hey man, I got pollen. Let's do something. And then we created the first. Thanks, mate. We created the first round of King Neptune, which we thought we had a keeper. And my homeboy was just persistent. No, man, let's go back into it. Let's look and see what we can find. And then we found, the King Neptune. So yeah, we definitely excited about it.
And what are the genetics?
Pancake breadth times London pound cake. So it's like 2 times London. It's like 2 times London pound cake, almost 2 times Thin Mint. So it's pretty dope.
Yeah.
What up, Lee? How you doing, man? I appreciate you for joining in, Lily. What are you working on right now?
Next project up is kind of so, man, I ended up having one of the worst germination rates I've ever had, but it was because not my own stuff. I'm hunting a bunch of old stuff, was just old stuff in my collection that I was like, I'm doing that thing that I keep telling everybody else to do, where I'm like, pop some seeds, get rid of them shits, those old ass seeds that you're like, I'm gonna find a project for them one day. Find a project, get them popped. So yeah. I've been going through for a little while now. I've been going through some older stuff, and so a while back I had a germ batch, and I would say everything that I popped of my own, I got 100%. And everything that I popped that was like the homies, I got 100%.
Okay.
Like people that I'm kind of friends with. The other stuff that I pulled that was like just old school stuff.
Yeah. Not so much.
If I got 15% to pop, I did really good. And there were some of them that I kind of had a feeling. Some of them I knew were some years old, but I didn't think they were quite that bad yet. Like stuff that was in the 5, 6, 7 year range, nothing that was super old. But yeah, it's been kind of a process. But the whole theme of essentially I've just done too many in a row that are fruity. Like I've done too many rounds in a row that were fruity stuff. Mm-hmm. And I've kind of noticed that I have some like gaping spots in my seed offerings. And so I'm doing kind of originally it was going to be poop heavy stuff, but best laid plans of mice and men. And so I'm kind of doing, it's just kind of the way it ended up, doing more of just a non-fruity, like gassy, cushy, poopy, chem, like just stuff that's not fruity.
Yeah.
And I did a couple in a row that were fruit, like the Nog Champa's got a lot of fruitier stuff. Then I did like another sorbet round. I've done a couple in a row, and I just realized, like, I say I always try to keep something for everybody. And if you hit me up and you're like, I'm into gassy stuff, I got a strain for you, but I'm down to like one, Yeah. And so, yeah, that's kind of the direction I was going, but I didn't quite get what I wanted out of this one. I mean, there's tons of great stuff, and I'm really stoked with what I'm working with, but there was stuff that I popped that I was kind of like, man, if this stuff pops, this is
Yeah.
going to be, and it was just, it was just one of those things. It's life. When you're working with older stuff, it's life,
I think that's exceptional, Turk, that, you can look at your inventory and see what you're missing and be like, hey, there's a gap in my inventory and work towards filling that gap. I think that's amazing, dude.
Well,
I think that'll only make, people want to mess with you more because there are so many choices when they contact Turk Fiend at
well, you
turkfiendgenetics.com.
you can't have a name like Terp Fiend, and you don't really have. If all I had was kind of one-dimensional shit, then people wouldn't fuck with me. And I've had multiple people hit me up and be like, the reason I found your work was because somebody told me, like, I'm getting, I've gone through everything else, and I want something that's unique. I want something that's different. I want something that nobody else has. And so when a lot of people find me, it's kind of under that premise of like they want terps, they want unique, they want different. So when somebody hits me up, no matter what they're looking for, my first question is, what's your best stuff for outdoor? What do you have that yields well? What kind of terps are you into? Because
Yeah.
that's going to be the easiest way for me to put you with something, no matter what. And then if you don't know, then then we can kind of figure out, okay, well, you just want something that's going to yield well. You're not really, this or that. But so I really do try to keep something for everybody.
Yeah.
If you hit me up and you go, I need a chem heavy strain, blackout truffle, but blackout truffle all day. If you want, something super exotic and fruity, I got tons of that. But yeah, I mean, trying to just kind of keep an eye on what I'm offering, what I'm kind of running low on. And that's how I do it in shifts. So I'll do like a round of all fruity strains. I'll do a round of all gassy strains. And then I'll get back to like a passion project and do something I just want to work on.
Right.
Something like Deep Chunk or, something that's probably not the most profitable project, but something that just means a lot to me,
So, I'm excited about running the Deep Chunk. You sent me the Deep Chunk F14. But where I'm at in my career right now, I'm just creating stuff that I think I would like, and I want to share it with you guys type thing, but I can't wait till I have enough creations and cultivars under my belt to where I can offer a plethora of terpenes and all type of things, so, definitely shout out for you for kind of laying the blueprint, bro.
Well, dude, man, that's what you should focus on anyway, no matter who you're breeding or what you're breeding for or what your goal is. At the end of the day, you should be breeding stuff that you care about, stuff that you think is awesome, things, stuff that you think other people would love to try. And it's like, in some way, this kind of brings us to our evening's topic, which is herms in the gene pool. But in a sense, as a breeder, you've got your work cut out for you. Because not only do you have a checklist of a million things that you're selecting from, right? That you want it to yield well, you want it to have great resin, you want it to have a profile that you love, you want it to. We're not usually selecting for just one thing,
right?
And then in that list of things, the fact that it won't herm. Now, if you only selected for one trait, it would take you years and years to make a strain that either had that trait or didn't have that trait, whatever we're talking about. That's not easy work. It's not quick work. It's not, So to the topic of the evening, we'll start at the absolute beginning for anybody who's not aware, right? Cannabis is essentially a plant that has two sexes, male plants, female plants.
Yep.
In the middle of those, cannabis has developed an evolutionary survival method. And that's when it gets stressed, it produces both sexes. And this can generally, no matter what anybody tells you, this can happen to any plant. With enough stress, any plant can be made to produce both sexes.
Yeah.
So as we go forward, understanding why that's a problem, which seems kind of obvious, but the reason it's an issue is because most people that grow, the reason we want what we want is because we don't want seeds in our garden. So we're selecting specifically for female plants that tend to produce more resin and more flower the longer they go unpollinated, right?
Right.
So the notion is that if you breed enough, you can make a strain that will produce 0 intersex plants, 0 hermaphroditic plants. This is one of the greatest myths in cannabis today. As it stands right now, there are 0 breeders that are selling a single strain that they can guarantee will not herm.
If they did, you'll see it on the pack.
It would be all over everywhere. It would be the biggest thing to happen in genetics. It would be the most groundbreaking, revolutionary thing to happen in cannabis. Everybody would want it. Everybody would know who had it. It doesn't exist. So there's a forum rumor, and I see this a lot, and I was talking to Earl lately about this, and we've kind of gone back and forth talking about this. There's a forum rumor that if XY strain that hermed had just been bred a little bit more, or you had made a little bit better selection, then it wouldn't herm, right? We've all seen that.
That's the
breeder,
quote unquote
right,
standard. You know, you search
right,
for.
if the breeder just bred it a little bit better, it wouldn't have hermed. Now, selection is everything, and in breeding, you absolutely need plants. You select for plants that don't herm. That doesn't mean that under enough stress in somebody's garden who's growing for the first time, who stresses their plants to the point where they're dying, it doesn't mean it's never going to herm ever. Hermaphroditism is something that we have to deal with on a certain degree, and we all have to understand that it's taken centuries of evolution for this plant to develop this response. So the notion that with just 5 generations or 10 generations of inbreeding, you're just going to completely remove it as a problem, it's the most one of the longest enduring myths in cannabis.
I want to bring it back a little bit, you know, because I notice we have like some people that don't even grow but are tuned in listening, right? So what are some things that causes plants to hermaphrodite, like we said, right? Because the overall goal of a plant is to repopulate itself and continue on with the gene pool that it's producing, right? So
it's not super simple. It seems super simple, but it's not. It's twofold. It's definitely genetic. So a predisposition to hermaphroditism is definitely genetic. 99% of the time, in its expression, it's environmental. It's some sort of stress. Now, in saying that, the thing that we don't usually discuss is that growing cannabis specifically under artificial light in artificial environments is stress. So one of the #1 ways that we see that stress show in cannabis is lighting. It's almost always light leaks, weird timer stuff with things not being perfectly synced up. That's not always the case, but a lot of the time it's the one trigger that it's most sensitive to.
Because again, it's been programmed for thousands of years to
breed at all costs. It's a survival trick. It breeds at all costs.
Well, to flower under certain lighting conditions. So when you do have that light leak and interrupting that chemical balance inside the plant, it tends to stress plants out and to herm. I've seen a new grower overwater a plant and stress it out because the roots were dying and the plant knew it was dying and decided to pop, nanners.
So
again,
not too long ago, I had one, and I hate to interrupt you, but it's just like what you just said. I had one myself that the first day that I started flushing it, So the first day that it didn't get its usual nutrient regimen, it hermed at the drop of a hat. Like within 12 hours of me giving it that first, it hadn't shown a single male flower, the whole flower. And it was at that moment when I flushed it, it just freaked out. It was just the slightest amount of stress, and it just freaked out.
Yeah, for sure, man, for sure. I do think cannabis plants are predisposed to herming. And I think if any breeder tells you that he can guarantee 100% that his plants won't harm, hey, that's a good selling
I don't
point.
even hear that. I don't even know that I've ever heard anybody say that, because it's the unwritten thing that we all know, but that nobody really wants to address, is that you could never give that guarantee. Right. I can give you a guarantee that I'll give you your money back if you're not happy, but I can't give you a guarantee that no matter what, no amount of stress, no matter who's growing it, in every grow condition, it's not going to, come on, man.
I compare it to, just because I call Terpene and I get his specific cut of blacked out truffle, and it runs well in his garden, it produces purples, whatever the case, right? Just because I grow it in my garden under my conditions doesn't mean that it's going to replicate the same success. You know what I mean? Same thing with herbs, bro. You can't say it's not going to do something in someone else's garden that you have no control over.
No, we could definitely do things in breeding and in selection to make it less prominent or less likely to express, right? Because in a world of polyhybrids, to absolutely not have that gene that expresses hermaphroditism is almost unheard of. Like you once again would have to go back generations and start selecting for that. And let's be honest, in the 80s, in the 90s, early 2000s, herms weren't even on people's mind. It's not that it wasn't, something that happened, but as a breeder, people weren't inherently breeding for that. And I bring up, I always hate to say this without really throwing anybody under the bus or talking shit, but one of the breeders who literally wrote books on cannabis genetics, literally one of his flagship strains to this day is still super prone to hermaphrodites. Blueberry, as much as I love DJ Short and the work that he's done, blueberry is literally one of the most hermaphroditic plants that I've ever worked with. Easiest to trigger, super fickle. And this is going back years because he's sold seeds of it for decades now. But it's still one of the most prone to herm. And the notion is, listen, this wasn't even something people were discussing in a breeding context until maybe 15, 20 years ago. So the fact that anybody can say, I have a plant and you can beat it to death and you can flip the lights off and on in the middle of its cycle and you can do whatever you want to it and give it all kinds of, pour cow mag straight into the pot, whatever you want, and it won't harm. It's because it's a response.
Exactly, it's a response. It's almost like how they tell you to take care of your body, right? You're not really just taking care of your body, you're taking care of your seed that you pass on to the next generation. Like how some diseases, some people are predisposed to it because their generational family has done it. Now, when you change your eating habits and the next generation does the same, you can lower the risk of quote-unquote diabetes. I think it's the same with plants. We know it started as an inherited trait. It wants to survive. It wants to make sure its prodigy continues. But if you work to continue to breed that out, you can make it less likely, but at the end of the day, it's still there from great grandmother. And that can.
You nailed it. Yeah.
Like, think about it, man. Like, you'll grow the blacked out truffle 1,000 times, and all of a sudden something pops up different. It's from a great grandparents. Like, you've never seen it before. So again, like you say, man, I totally agree. I don't think you can guarantee that any plant will not harm, probably at the end of the day.
Nope. Nobody can. And as long as we go into it with that understanding, then the truth is we're all playing with the same deck of cards. A lot of people don't want to admit it, but the notion that you don't see it in some breeders and you do see everybody everybody, if you grew out enough of anybody's seeds, you are going to see at least a population of some sort that's going to harm. Now, when you're growing those plants in perfect conditions and they're literally in absolutely optimum conditions,
Right.
then of course you've probably never seen it.
And if you
But like
do,
you
I
said,
think that's the problem. And
right.
I'm gonna just keep it real. If you're doing everything in your garden, everything's dialed in, and you know it, and then it harms. Hey, you have all right.
Two things. First one, if it happens in a perfect environment like that, it's mostly just genetic. It's absolutely not been bred out hardly at all. It's something that inevitably. The other one is if it happens early in flower. So when I say every plant can be forced to herm, what I'm generally saying is that if you stress them in the right ways, so if I let a plant go 4 weeks past where it normally would go, or do wonky shit with the lighting cycles, I can make almost any plant herm. But if your plant herms in perfect conditions, or if your plant herms at week 3 and just throws a whole branch of male flowers on a female plant, yeah, that's just either bad luck or poor selection. Like, there's not a whole lot you can say about that, specifically.
Pardon my ignorance, because I don't know, but when you select for a male, can a male be quote unquote hermaphroditic? Can a male have?
He can carry the trait. He can carry the trait for hermaphroditism. Yeah, absolutely. And you can have plants that are mostly males, but that also produce some small female flowers. Yeah, it can go both ways.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Man, that's good to know.
While we're talking about sex in cannabis, the other thing that is kind of controversial that I think we should kind of toss into this conversation are males that come from fem seeds. So this is another one of these, especially from people that produce feminized seeds. Gotcha. It's really controversial to talk about this because they don't want you to know that you can still get male plants from female seeds. So when they first started marketing fem seeds to kind of the cannabis market in the 90s, they sold them as 99% female, which if you take from that what it's saying, we can't guarantee that every plant is female. So while there's lower numbers, there's still a rate of male flowers. So when people tell me, well, I don't want to have to deal with sex in my plants, so I grow fems, the truth is female seeds, feminized seeds, can still produce male plants, right? So what you're doing is you're using ethylene blockers to essentially force female plants to produce male parts so that you can either self-pollinate or you can pollinate another plant and those seeds come out 99% female, right? Mm-hmm. Right. But that doesn't mean every plant is a female. It can still produce male plants. The argument becomes, everybody says, well, they're technically not males because they have certain... No, the truth is it can produce plants that produce balls that produce pollen. In our world, that's a male. Like if it produces nothing but male parts on a cannabis plant, that's not good from a pack of feminized seeds.
If I buy some feminized seeds, I expect them to be worked. I believe, just my studies, if I take the feminized...
Nobody's doing that. Fems have generally been in the market a quick cash grab. For people that fuck with fems, 99% of the time, it's just about turn a quick buck, find a hype strain, self it, and now I got S1s. Like there's not a ton of breeders doing deep work breeding in fem lines.
And that's why I don't mess with them. But like I was saying, if I buy fem seeds or if I'm running fem seeds and I take and I reverse that plant to another female plant and keep working that, I don't believe that the male will show.
Okay,
I
so
don't think it'll have a male.
let's back up on a genetic level. If you're only using one plant, so if we're talking about selfing, okay, the process of essentially taking one plant, making it breed with a cut of itself, and then continuing with that, you absolutely increase your chances of hermaphroditism, because in genetics, if we have a recessive trait and we have another recessive trait, that's going to show as a dominant trait. So essentially, you're going to have, a higher susceptibility to showing in environmental conditions. We'll just use herms as an example. So by forcing a plant to breed with itself, if it has even a recessive gene for hermaphroditism, by breeding it with itself, you guarantee you have two. And the chances in modern polyhybrids that you're not going to have at least a recessive gene for hermaphroditism is probably 0%. So anytime you're and if you're doing femmes where you're taking it, forcing it to make male or female pollen, forcing a female to produce male parts, and you pollinate a second plant, a second strain, that's not necessarily guaranteeing you're going to end up with herm issues. But if you're selfing a plant and forcing it to breed with itself, the chances that those plants are going to have the problems with herms go up exponentially.
It's weird because you take a plant that hermed and pollinate another plant and then say that there's no chance for it to herm. Think about it.
You could very easily argue that your ability to force that plant to do that easily is probably a good indicator that it carries that gene to be able to do that at will, quickly and easily. You know what I'm saying?
If I was a film connoisseur and I purchased film seeds on a regular, I would definitely be upset if there weren't consistently females. You know what I mean? Like, because you pay higher for female seeds too, which means that supposedly there was more work done, because anytime you charge higher, there's more work. So
yeah,
I can see the argument of somebody that's selling film, because me and my homie was just having this conversation the other day. There's a breeder that's known for film seeds. That's what he does. Like you said, he takes the hype and he flips it. And my homie said he's run his stuff countless of times. He has bags and bags of stuff, and he's like, you're gonna get males when growing his seeds. It just is what it is. He said you're gonna find some fire keepers.
It all depends on how many. So with the best case scenario, you're talking 1%, right? So that means 1 out of 100. Worst case, you could be talking 5 to 10%. So it's like, with 10 seeds, you're playing a lottery. So let's say as a customer, you only buy 10 seeds. And I get this one a lot in breeding photos, in regular sex plants, regular photo period. Because people hit me up and they go, well, how many are going to be female? And I say, if I told you a number, I would just be guessing, or I would be making it up. Now, if we take 10,000 seeds, right? The chances out of 10,000 that it's going to be 50-50 males and females are pretty high. You're going to get at a large enough, unless you've got a wonky male or female that produces tons of one or the other, you're usually going to land at 50-50. But if you only take a 10 seed sample out of 10,000 seeds, it's like rolling a dice. It could be any number. You could get 2 females, you could get 4 females, you could get every 1 females, and somebody else could get all males. There's no...
I've ran countless of regular packs, and I consistently find myself throwing away males. And I've even read the fact that it's the way you germinate them, or even the way that the light
sex can largely be determined in vitro, which means before the plants have actually popped the seed, you can actually tell whether it's going to be male or female.
No.
which would generally mean, yeah, if I'm not mistaken, scientifically, I don't know about you, but in a lab, if I'm not mistaken, you can genetically test for sex in the seed. So before it's actually been germinated, you can actually tell whether it's a male or a female, which would mean there might be some little environmental things that you can do, but
Right.
I've never seen anything that reliably, test after test, would produce more females out of regular sex seeds, other than breeding. If you find males and females that tend to produce tons of females, then that's definitely one you want to keep. But always keep in mind, that's just one trait in a huge pool of things that we want to look for. So it's like I say, as a breeder, you're supposed to be, literally everything to everybody, because you're making selections for whatever's important to you on a grow level. But there's things as far as producing seeds that so many people don't think about, as far as the size of the seed, how many males and females do they generally breed, little things like how quick do the seeds pop and germinate. Some strains are just slower in all vegetative states. So it's like selecting strains that have super healthy seeds, super healthy seed casings. It's you're literally trying to do everything for everybody. So the reality is you can't always, you're not going to always win the genetic lottery, right? Sometimes you're going to have more of a problem even after you've done selection after selection after selection. I think on some level, as a breeder, if you have something like that, either you don't release it or you just be very honest with people that, like, hey, look, if you really want to dig in this, there's probably some issues, but I'm putting them out there anyway. It's not something I would do personally, but I've seen other people do it, and I've seen customers reply positively to it.
I definitely want to put that disclaimer out there, though, bro. Like, we're not giving an excuse for our breeders to become lazy.
Oh, no.
Not, you know what I mean? Like, we gotta say that. Like, there is work to be
Not at
done,
all.
and we do try to breed out the hermaphroditic trait.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. It should be something that every breeder takes seriously.
Correct.
But the problem that I see is there's a lot of misconceptions on a consumer level. So what I tend to see a lot of, we get back to the comment of, if you just bred it a little bit more, if you just worked it a little bit more, it wouldn't harm. The notion that just insane amounts of inbreeding, which is filial breeding, a male and a female, a brother and a sister, you're essentially inbreeding. The notion that just doing that 4 or 5 more times would have rid the whole strain of that problem is silly.
Because again,
it's silly.
You're still selecting for everything else.
Generations.
Right. Think how long it'll take you to really do a project if you select one by one. You know what I mean? And how many times just by introducing the pollen back into it that you got to start over, because now, you know what I mean? Like, come on, man. Like, let's be for real. Let's be for real.
And the other notion is that if you do that enough times, then you will completely rid the plant of that response. And that's also not just simply not true. Like the notion that if you just have an F10 and every single generation you selected for plants that don't show herms, now, how are you testing? Are you testing light stress? Are you testing nutrient stress? Are you testing temperature stress? Are you testing multiple lighting stress? Nobody's doing that.
Every time.
Nobody's doing that. Oh, nobody is doing that. Nobody is doing that. That's the silliest thing I've ever heard.
It's not
I love when people tell me.
I hate to say it, but you can't be profitable. It's time, it's money, it's resources. Repetitively done, man. Like, I get it. We don't want plants to harm, but the notion that you can eradicate that
entirely, yeah. The other thing, man, is that damn it, I forgot what I was going to say. The knocking over the pipe, I completely lost it.
You didn't break it.
My favorite thing, I've discussed this before. My favorite thing on the planet is, here is my ratty looking plant I was stress testing. Nobody keeps a room full of powdery mildew so they can stick their plants in there with a bunch of powdery mildew and make sure their strain doesn't get powdery mildew. Nobody is doing that. You want to come see my sex dungeon where I keep all my powdery mildew?
Yeah.
No, nobody does that. So the notion that, like, when somebody shows you a plant covered in mildew and one next to it who doesn't have any mildew, unless you're outdoors, all you're telling me is you got a bad PM problem. You're not really telling me you didn't stress test anything. You can't control your environmental conditions. Yeah, and you got a nasty ass grow, and you happen to notice that one plant in the corner didn't get it. So now you use that to advertise. Yeah. But the reality is, I'm not keeping a recurring mite problem. I'm not just keeping a mite problem every single round so I can throw some plants in there and see which ones don't get mites. Yeah, I don't get mites. So I don't, at a certain level, it's one thing if you're breeding outdoors and all of your work is for outdoors, because then I can say that. Then I can say there's a plant there that just legitimately didn't get this problem. Yeah. But nobody's keeping rooms full of problems to test tons of gear in. Normally, testing today is just finding a bunch of random people on the internet to grow your stuff out, and you hope none of them tell you it hermed. That's what 90% of the breeders out there are doing. They grow it themselves, or they give them away to people and have them grow them. But the reality is, nobody's really stress testing every single strain they put out to the degree that people think they are. Nobody's dropping nuclear bombs on their plants.
I'm gonna be honest. Like, I don't keep pesting shit around just to throw on my. I don't want it. Now it goes back to the notion that we always stress. You have to start with solid genetics. Like, that's basics. And then,
initial selections, especially if you're starting a line, if you're starting a new line of your own, your initial selections make more of a difference than anything you do after that. So let's say we're going to start a project and we're going to take plant A and plant B. When we cross these two together and we start looking through what's there, like I said, you have a checklist of different things. It could be you're looking for water hash. You're looking for great water hash strains. You're looking for strains that have a particular flavor. You're looking for plants that don't herm. You're looking for plants that don't stretch that much. So it all comes down to how many plants can you go through and how many plants can you test with. Because the other thing is most people aren't running 5,000 and 10,000 plant testers. I don't know of any breeder that's doing that kind of testing, 10,000 of every single strain before they release a strain. And it takes that sort of numbers to really know what kind of, are we saying this problem occurs every 5%? This problem occurs every 3%? Until you've grown enough out, it's almost impossible to say what this actual strain, the actual numbers on its genetic probabilities are.
I'll be honest, in my camp and what we do, we breed to see consistency. Can we replicate the success each time with this plant? And if we can do that, which we've done with the King Neptune, that's a success to us. Again, it's like you said, I don't keep mites or I don't keep PM around just to keep throwing it at this plant, because at the end of the day, it's not profitable. If I don't have usable biomass, bro, at the end of my grow, it makes no sense. You know what I mean? So, and if you're grow and you have the space and the ability to throw PM and spider mites and russets and aphids at your garden, and man, a shout out to you. You know what I mean? But I don't keep this shit around in my garden to even know. Like, all I can say is I haven't seen it do it. I got
a hot take. So somebody just said 90% of breeders are really pollen chuckers. Let's start with number one. Nobody that I know that breeds cannabis has a degree. I've never met a breeder that has a degree in genetics, biology, botany. I'm sure they're out there, but there's not a ton of them. Yeah. The second thing, the only difference that separates what we call a pollen chucker from a breeder is the number of plants they can select from. So the real is the people that you call pollen chuckers are usually people that can only run a couple of each strain, right? The only difference, because nobody here's genetically, nobody's really breeders. Nobody's really in the real breeding world. Everybody that's breeding cannabis would be looked at as a joke. There's nobody that's involved right now that's doing some higher level of breeding that nobody's ever seen before. And
Right.
once again, it's bro science. So many of the breeders out here are doing it from feel. They're doing it from what they learned, what they see. You know, it's intuition. It's not usually science-based.
What I've learned in the industries that I've been in as so far is the difference between a pollen chucker and a breeder is the cred that you get from the industry. If the industry labels you a pollen chucker, then that's what you are. If the industry fucks with you and you're a great breeder, then that's what it is, bro. We're all doing the exact same thing, trying to grow the best cannabis possible. And if you're doing anything else than that, then you're a pollen chucker. But if you are breeding to improve the plant, then to me, you're a breeder.
Yeah, once again. So if I would say this, the reason that I don't like the term pollen chucker is because it discourages people from breeding. And every person that wants to make their own seeds, every person that wants to get involved with genetics should be able to do so without feeling like their work is less important than somebody who's just simply been doing it longer. The reality is, most of your breeders who have been in this for a long time, that's their credential, is that they've been doing it for a long time. It's not that they went to school and learned this from some Mendelian level and have some sort of insight that you or I don't have. It's all an eye. It's all an eye and population size. How many plants can you use for your selections so that you can essentially say, well, this herm problem, if we're just picking one thing out of 100, this herm problem is only going to happen in 1% of the plants. So very few people are ever going to notice it. It's not going to be a big deal.
Right.
Versus this is probably going to be a 25% problem where a quarter of every plant, you know, of every seed is going to produce it.
Yeah, of a 700 field acre, you know, then you're breeding. Then you're giving accurate numbers. If you can produce an acre and 25% of that acre herms, I feel like you can legitimately say this plant has a herm problem. But if most home growers, I think the legal limit in California maybe 10 plants or 11 plants. I guess if you got a license, you can have a bunch of plants, right? But no one's doing fields of tests on a level. We just don't have the funding to do.
And I'm not saying there's not breeders out there that aren't selecting from large populations. That's definitely the case. What I'm saying is in the common mind, in the customer mind of just regular customers, right? When people say pollen chuckers, I think what they think of is people that are just smaller entities that aren't, you know, able to run 3,000 plants. I don't believe that's the case, but I think that's how people perceive it. It's just like, oh, well, he's got a huge farm, so he can do bigger numbers. He's a real breeder versus somebody who's,
true. That's true. I can agree to that, though. You know, that there's nothing wrong with them. But somebody like me that don't have acres that still puts in the work and creates good work is still a breeder in my eyes, too. You know, respect the small breeders at the end of the day, too, if that's putting in work. You know, I'm sorry, man, but that's
just because you have 10,000 plants in front of you doesn't mean your eye for selection is going to make a damn. Yeah. If you don't have an eye for selection, if you're not able to find plants that, like I said, check all the boxes, and as a breeder, normally what you're doing is guessing the future. You're trying to predict what this plant's going to do if I breed it with this plant, you know, before you get started, and having a reasonable expectation. Well, I know this is the plant that does this, this, and this. This is the plant that does this, this, and this. You know, this is what I want to come to the party with. Not everybody uses that sort of eye to breeding. And I think the problem goes in that, like, what we don't want to say is that when we spend our hard-earned money, we want to feel like the person that produced what we're paying for did some sort of labor to produce it and has an eye towards what's important to us and cares about the same sort of thing that we do, right? And the notion is, right now there's 1,000,001 seed sellers, seed breeders, seed vendors, and so you're really trying to find people that you trust more often than not, right? Have you run their stuff before and generally it doesn't give you issues? Stick with it. That doesn't necessarily mean that that gear under somebody who's never grown before his hand isn't going to harm. That just means that if you find somebody that you like, whether it's a breeder, you know, whether it's a seed producer, if you find a vendor, if you find somebody that, like, you don't see problems with their stuff, stick with it.
Yeah.
Support them.
Definitely.
You know, and that's how the industry will flourish going forward, because the money will speak to the people that are doing the best work.
Definitely. And I think without small breeders, the industry don't survive. You know what I mean? Because not everybody has a local dispensary in their area, you know,
So
for lack of better words.
Another thing that we can talk about, and like we're like 6-7 minutes out. Another thing that we can kind of talk about is that I see a lot of people saying stuff like, oh, well, all these cookie strains and all this cake stuff ruin the market, and breeding's garbage now because everybody's working on. There are so many breeders, there are so many people producing seeds that for you to try and generalize the entire gene pool with saying stuff like that is just silly. There are so many breeders, whether they're closet breeders, whether they're mid-sized breeders, whether they're huge breeders, that are focusing on what they want to work on. Some of that is going to be hype. Some of that is obviously going to be people riding other people's coattails. A lot of it is going to be, how can I get rich just like somebody else I just saw get rich?
Right.
But that doesn't mean that's the market. That doesn't mean every breeder is using cookie and cake crosses to the point where they beat the whole gene pool down. Like, I see a lot of that kind of generalization in breeders that do podcasts that are just like, all this cake is ruin the market and everybody's breeding garbage now and everything looks the same. And it's like, find other breeders. Go find smaller breeders who are doing better work that interests you, that are focusing on terps, that are focusing on unique profiles, or are focusing on unique cannabinoid profiles, because they're out there. If that's all you see, it's because that's all you're looking for.
Facts, man. Facts. But hey, I ain't gonna lie. You know, I love me some cookies though, bro. I would keep them coming, guys. Keep them coming. Keep it around for me.
I don't think at any point the gene pool has exploded faster than it is right now.
Yeah.
And I think that is simply because so many people are able to do it, make seeds, make genetics, share clones, share plants, that more people are able to focus on the stuff that they love. So it's like, going forward, like I said, in whatever projects you're working on, do it with passion. Do it because you love it, because you feel like the cross that you're making is something that either doesn't exist or that you feel like should make it into the next round of genetics. And that's enough of a reason to make seeds. Everybody should do it that can. So the notion that you're a pollen chucker because you decided to make some seeds and you decided to cover your ends by selling some packs, that's ridiculous. You know, that's ridiculous. We wouldn't be where we are if it weren't for breeders taking chances. People making seeds that maybe weren't the biggest or the best. So many strains come out, and it's because somebody just made something they were passionate about.
Right.
That can exist in a world of hype. Both can exist. You know, the truth is, as soon as something goes hot, every big company wants to just rip it off and make their buck off of it. That doesn't mean that's all the market is.
I don't care if you are the biggest breeder or no one knows you. If I can tell that you put passion and work and you can show me, I'll buy your seeds. You know what I mean? 'Cause
that's what people pick up on as customers. They really do. And that's why I say, if you go at everything with that eye, with that passion, people pick up on it. because you talk about it in that way. You talk about it because it comes from a place of being passionate about the selections you're doing and being passionate about the work that you're doing. And people pick up on that. And so when you talk about your work, as long as it's something you love and it's something you're passionate about, people are going to love it too, you know, and you're not going to hit every time. I think the best of us are really happy if we can bat 75, 85, 95%. Like, you know, if I'm being realistic, my goal is to hit more home runs than it hits strikes. And I don't have a lot of people complain. So the few times I do, it's easy for me as a breeder to go, man, let me send you something else that I think you might like a little bit better.
I think,
you know, and
the goal as a breeder is to be able to have something that you would love to continue to grow in your own garden. If you're not consistently growing your shit in your garden, I don't know what you're doing. I don't want it because you don't like it enough, you know?
Yeah. So, man, we got a couple more minutes. Let's just wrap it. You know, you want to give a quick plug? Where can folks find you?
You know, I'm going to give them a plug, man. Appreciate the opportunity to tell y'all that y'all can follow me at The Real Mac Blunts on Instagram. You can follow me at Mr. Mac Blunts on YouTube. You can follow me on Twitter at Mr. Mac Blunts. You can follow my Patreon, same handle, guessing. So I appreciate you guys for tuning in to another episode of Dank Talk. Turk, go get that website, www.turkfiend.com. I'm going to throw my boy one, too, because you know where to get it. They know where to get it from, man. But
that's it. We just put June mystery bags up, so those have been hot. Everybody's grabbing those. That's the best deal on the market, man. It's $100 even. You have a chance to get between 3 and 10 packs of seeds. The last two rounds we did, nobody got 3 packs. Everybody that got 3 packs got the 4th pack as a coupon. So the reality is, we always say it's a $210 value because essentially you're guaranteed to get at least 3 packs. But the last few rounds, we've made sure that the people that didn't get the 4 packs or they got the lowest number of packs essentially got an extra pack of your choice. So you get between 3 and 10 packs of seeds. It's a $210 value. It comes from all of my different lines. This month in June, we dug into some vault stuff. So there'll be a couple of packs from my older work and stuff. And yeah, man, we're going to do a big July 4th through 7/10 sale.
Nice.
So keep an eye on that. But yeah, like you said, terpfiend.com, terpfi3nd.com. You can also find me at terpfiend, terpfi3nd on Instagram. And go there and please follow me somewhere other than Instagram. This is, we do this every time, and I wish we would just move to YouTube. Like I said, after I just got back from my trip, I'm going to get my P's and Q's together and get some camera lighting situation, and we're going to start doing these somewhere else because, you know, we're just not getting the views we should. We're just not getting the looks we should. And to be honest, it's just because Instagram at this hour, nobody's on Instagram. You know, that's the other thing I've kind of realized is I thought we'd get these in the evening and it would be better for us. But the reality is nobody's on Instagram. Anyway, we're out of time. Mac, I'll see you next week. Peace, dog. Thank you so much. Y'all have a good one.